I had a chat with Steve Hackett about his new album, Under a Mediterranean Sky. He's also recently published his autobiography, A Genesis in My Bed. Legend Steve joined Genesis at the start of 1971 as their guitarist, alongside the classic lineup of Peter Gabriel, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford and Phil Collins. Steve's intricate guitar work was a key element of the Genesis albums. After leaving Genesis at the end of '77, Steve's solo career, which now spans more than 30 albums, has demonstrated his extraordinary versatility with both electric and acoustic guitar. Steve is renowned as both an immensely talented and innovative rock musician and a virtuoso classical guitarist and composer. And this was recognised in 2010 when he was inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame. He's also worked alongside Steve Howe of Yes in the supergroup GTR. Steve's compositions take influences from many genres, including jazz, classical and blues. For his latest studio works, The Night Siren and At the Edge of Light, Steve has explored the influences of world music. Recent tours have seen Steve celebrate his time with Genesis, including a spectacular 2018 tour in which Steve realised a long-held ambition to perform the works of Genesis live with his band and an orchestra. He recently released Selling England by the Pound and Spectral Mornings live at Hammersmith, a live recording of his hugely successful 2019 tour that saw him celebrating that Genesis classic as well as the 40th anniversary of one of his most loved solo albums. His new album takes inspiration from Steve's extensive travels around the Mediterranean, with each song representing a different magical place. This instrumental masterpiece features the nylon strung guitar whilst fusing world instruments and a wide range of orchestral sounds. Here's the chat I had with this absolute legend. This is Weekend Calling with Claire Kerr on NLive Radio in association with the Retro Charts. It's my absolute pleasure and delight to welcome the father of prog rock, the man who can make a guitar sing. It's no other than Mr. Steve Hackett. Happy New Year, Steve.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too.
Are you well?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Yeah,
you're looking well.
Very happy at the moment. Very productive period. I know we can't do shows, but there's been a lot of recording going on, a lot of writing and a lot of playing. So music goes on in the shadows.
It has to, doesn't it?
Does.
Yeah, it has to keep going. So you have a new album then set for release on the 22nd of this month, Under a Mediterranean Sky, and it's a fully instrumental solo acoustic album, really celebrating the beauty and experience of your extensive travels with your lovely wife Jo.
Yes, it's got this Mediterranean theme and lots of, I like to think, different styles of music from around the Mediterranean. So although it's acoustic, it's also orchestral, and there's other instruments that might be less familiar to people. So I'm pleased to be a painting with music, painting with sound rather than with pictures. But hopefully that will convey some of the ideas that we came across when we were on our travels.
Sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a lot of fun making it too.
Yes, I did. Yes, it was great to be able to do that. It took a couple of months to record. We had some performances from other people on it who were amazing players, and so it's a kind of a bit of a festival of virtuosity from other people, and I'm very proud of it. I love the way it sounds, and I have to resist playing it to myself every day and get on with new stuff.
You should play it. Keep playing it. It is wonderful.
Yeah.
The opening track, Medina, the Walled City or the Silent City, it's a really dramatic start, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
This kind of grandeur, of ancient Malta. It sounds to me almost like a film score.
Yes. Well, indeed, yes. I think music that works visually, that you're hearing, but it's creating pictures, there's only one way to describe it, which is as cinematic. And I'm very happy. I mean, I have used, or rather, I've had things used for film in the past. It's often documentary makers who tend to pick up on the stuff. And when you think of instruments like the duduk, and it seems to conjure these kind of landscapes, bleak, sometimes unforgiving landscapes, but magic nonetheless. And so I think filmmakers like that sort of thing. And there's also the other aspect of sort of romantic music and everything that conveys.
I do think with the romance side of things that you say, though, I do think the album itself is kind of, love weaves through that album, doesn't it?
I like to think so, yeah. I think I'm probably getting more romantic with old age, to be honest. You know, the older I get, it's I think, well, don't hold back, reveal that. If you feel that, then do it, and don't worry about trying to be contemporary, up to date, and all of that. So I've indulged that pleasure for quite some time, even in my Genesis. There were moments of that, and what I like about quite a lot of other writers is the fact that they might go back in time and celebrate an earlier era, and then of course it all becomes timeless.
When you visited these places, did the tunes then sort of enter your head, or this idea for composition? How did it work in that respect?
Well, for instance, visiting Egypt and various other places around the desert, Morocco and Jordan, there was something, or there is something that always happens when we're in that area. The first time I visited the Sphinx, we were just there for a day. It was just it's one of those Rupert Bear trips. We were there for the day and then whisked away. And but when I was opposite the Sphinx, I thought this has got to be the most exotic place on earth for people from where we're from. And I was just hearing music the whole time. I was writing it down. And then we had a much more extensive trip to Egypt, traveled up the Nile, and it was just gorgeous. And so much of it is unspoilt and still there. That's the thing. You could have been seeing the same views that Antony and Cleopatra looked at. So it's that thing, it's
quite humbling in that respect.
It's lovely, yeah. It's wonderful. It's tree lined. They haven't surrounded it with industry. They've protected that area. And
was it quite haunting as well?
Oh yes. And so once again, although I didn't have a guitar with me at the time, I didn't have an instrument, I was writing stuff down thinking, yeah, this melody might work. And so with the track Sirocco, third track, that to me is the most evocative, I think, of all the places. Trying to paint it again, trying to recall it, what the impressions that it made upon you, just visiting sites that look like they were painted yesterday, so fresh and beautiful, and it just screams music at me.
Sure. So when you decided then to produce it, you worked with a longtime friend, didn't you, Roger King, because you wanted to get this idea of the classical, the world music, but this orchestra as well within that. Yeah. So how did you go about recording that at the time? We were in this sort of crazy national lockdown, and it must have been difficult as well to get all that together.
Well, yes, we had a small team that made a very big noise in the end. Like you said, the way it starts is the kind of symphonic proportions. And I don't apologize for that.
Absolutely not.
Roger did a wonderful job on the orchestral arrangements. And I don't know how he did it. He seems to work his magic. So I'm a fan of everything that he did on the album. He managed to get great sounds with every instrument, including the guitar. But but conjuring an orchestra from very little was an extraordinary feat, I think.
Yeah, indeed, it was.
It was wonderful. I just marveled at it the whole time. So it's lovely when you're working on a project and you're falling in love with it at the same time, when it's really working out and it feels charmed. So as much as it's a struggle to get the fingers around this kind of complex stuff, once you've done it, there's that sense of oh wow, this feels really good. And of course, the influence of Jo that you mentioned, my wife, who wrote parts of it, she said, I think this time you're going to do an acoustic album, and you don't want to make it sound like all the others. You can take it into exotic areas and aspects of world music and all of that. And she felt that it was important that it should separate itself out from all the other things that I'd done in that way. So I suppose in some ways it's closer in spirit to some of the rock albums I've done with world instruments. So it doesn't feel like, when you say acoustic album, file under cardboard in the cupboard. No, it's not like that. It's big and lush and lovely. I lose myself, and I hope other people will as well.
I really think that they will. Was it all consuming at the time? Because you do have that real attention to detail, don't you? Sort of by your own admission, you're a detail freak.
Yeah.
But you knew when it was ready. Yes.
Funnily enough, it's Rob Townsend who plays on a couple of the tracks on this with sax and flute. His phrase is that the devil is in the detail, and he's right, of course. He's a very detailed, accomplished player, the most amazing improviser I have ever come across. Amazing stuff. He never does a bad solo. It's always a case of here's a really good one and here's a great one, and you're dealing with an embarrassment of riches whenever he works on something. So I think other people are important on this, is what I'm trying to say. And then, of course, there's Christine Townsend, which is his namesake, but they're no relation. But Christine Townsend, who plays wonderful violin, sometimes unaccompanied, and wonderful viola. Because her dad was a viola player, and when he retired, he gave her the instrument that he played in. And this thing is as deep as a cello, the viola. It's a lovely, lovely sound. So we work with her when we want things to be absolutely authentically orchestral. And I've been working with her for many years, and very kindly, she heard that I wasn't well over Christmas, and she turned up one night on the doorstep and she said, I baked some bread for you. And I thought that was absolutely lovely. In fact, I must give her a call to say, thank you.
Thanks for thinking of me. Thanks for the bread. That's kind.
Absolutely lovely. Yes, great.
Lovely folk. Let's talk about Andalusian Heart. This is a beautiful track, this flamenco infused style, very romantic.
It's funny. That was one of the first to be written. I visited Spain several times, usually as a player, but sometimes as a tourist. And we got to visit the Alhambra and the parts of Andalusia, the Sacromonte, the sacred mountain where the gypsies live, and work and play and dance in the caves. And that was just amazing. They look like they're playing and dancing and singing for their very lives every time. It's so full on. And I was talking to one of the guitarists there, and he was showing me one or two moves on the guitar, and I thought, oh, that's good. I don't quite understand how it works, and I practiced it, and months later,
those fingers move fast, don't they?
They do move.
You're really getting your fingers moving.
they do move fast at times. A lot of it is the use of the right hand. That you'd think that it was all left hand work, nipping around the fretboard, but I noticed years and years ago when I was watching the late great Andres Segovia on TV, I think in the 1960s, black and white TV, and there were all these notes coming out, and it seemed like he was hardly moving. And I realized he was doing it practically everything with barre shapes with this left hand, but the right hand was doing so much work, so much complex stuff. And so I think I decided right then and there that I was going to have to be a fingerstyle player. And so over the years, I've absolutely marginalized the plectrum. And even when I play electric, I very rarely use a pick. So that makes me an old fuddy-duddy. I'm sorry. First of all, when I was a kid, I thought, yeah, it's all about electric guitar. That's great.
Yeah.
And yeah, you need a plectrum for that. And playing with the right hand fingers, it's unmanly. It's a bit like knitting. Real men don't knit. I corrected my thoughts there, and yeah, you can do so much more when you've got this hand working. But most rock players choose not to.
No, that's right.
That's fair enough. Each to his own. But there was just something that clicked, and even now, I'm working away, and if you play for a certain number of hours each day, certain things, they start to reveal themselves to you, despite yourself. You will change position. You'll get bored with what you can already do and move on to other things. Some days I don't. Some days it's just scales up and down, same shapes. So, not getting anywhere, but at least I've kept the fingers nimble. But over the years, I don't see it as much as a challenge as I rather. Sorry?
That's important, isn't it? To keep those fingers working, but then all this discovery as well that comes with trying out different things. That's what makes you such a phenomenal player.
Well, it's strange, I never really used a capo much because you use a capo to folk players tend to use it, and funny enough, flamenco players use it quite a bit. And I realized that they do it in order to produce a different sound, to find the sweet spot, which is full on for them, the flamenco players. But then I've noticed that if you play softly with a capo, it starts to sound more harp-like. And those aspects I look for as well. I look for the full-on thing as well. Yeah, the salvos, bam, 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 bam. But there's this other aspect. So, guitar's good at this sort of dynamic range. Nylon guitar, nylon strings. Not the thing.
It's all about the nylon strings, isn't it?
That's it. Nylon strings, light gauge nylon strings. For those who are serious about it, I had a late great friend, a wonderful guitarist called Theo Cheng, who showed me many moves on the guitar, cross string trilling and four-fingered cross string trilling. And it doesn't have to be for the anoraks, this, even classical players don't get this stuff right, But there were all these other things that were kicking in, things that he could do that I couldn't do, and things I could do that I was passing on to him, to Theo, who died quite recently. And this idea of the guitar becoming the harp, again, you need to have a good right hand, because you're fooling people into thinking that it's this endless sort of scale from top to bottom. But I'm still nuts about it.
That's really interesting.
I thought people silly with this, But I know other people, who've been playing for years and years and years and don't fall out of love with the process.
That's really interesting. That idea of discovery as well. You see, you always want to find out new things, different sounds that you can make, how you can make a guitar. It's not just the sound of a guitar, but what else can it become? And I think, that's demonstrated beautifully throughout that album as well, the different transitions, the journey that it takes you on. And the album itself, you can just lie on the sofa, close your eyes, takes you almost into a meditative state, really, doesn't it?
I think it is a record for drifting off to. Those early albums that I heard, as I said, I mentioned the Segovia work a lot when I heard him playing the Bach stuff. very early albums that were recorded, records that were recorded in the 1920s and 1930s. But, you know, still, you know, extraordinary playing, extraordinary technique, complete devotion to the art of it. You know, you figured that the guy probably did nothing else but play. And it is important to have a life outside it.
Well, of course. Yeah. And really, you can show that well through your travel, because this is all about the travel. This is the journey through the music of the travels that you've done. And you do love to travel, don't you? You've always had an adventurous spirit. Even as a young boy in 1950s London, you were seeking adventure, even as a small boy, weren't you?
Well, it's a funny thing. We lived in Pimlico, and then when the 1960s kicked in, I was still very young, you know, 10, 11, 12. And I thought, you know, wandering around the corner to the places where in a few years' time, the Beatles and the Stones were going to haunt and live and show up. And I'd, you know, pass the old rock star in the street when I was still a schoolboy.
But that inspired you, though, didn't it?
Well, they were. I think the Beatles and Stones were very inspiring at that time, and still are now in so many ways, which is why their records still sell like crazy. People still go nuts over the Stones. It's amazing that they're basically still doing it, and I like to think that they will be after lockdown. You know, wonderful.
They'll keep going.
Of course, yeah. It was a great time growing up, I think, in the 1960s, with all those sort of sonic developments that were going on in rock. Guitar sounds were starting to explode. Hendrix was due to explode onto our screens. So I had two very good teachers, Andres Segovia, Jimi Hendrix, even though I didn't meet either of them.
But totally inspiring.
Yeah, I saw them live, and that was extraordinary. Yeah.
And you decided, I think one of your defining moments when you saw Jagger strutting down the King's Road, you thought, I want to be in a band. I'm going to play guitar and get myself in a band.
Yes, well, at the time, as I say, I was just wandering back from school one day, and just as I was about to hit Sloane Square, where King's Road really ends, you know, for the idea of the swinging 60s type thing, I'm sure he just had emerged from Peter Jones, and he looked very dapper. He had Ray-Ban sunglasses, blue blazer, grey trousers, dressed very, very straight. But you know, at a time when I was about, God, would I have been 15, 16? I don't know. And he would have been about, you know, 20, 21. And of course, I was a huge fan of their music, but I never was the kind of guy who was going to go out and say, "Oh, I recognize you. I've got your records. Please sign this for me." I always thought, yeah, you know, give people their privacy. And if someone introduces you, that's fine. And I did get to meet a lot of my heroes later in later life, including Jagger and Paul McCartney. But each time, you know, I thought, you've got to wait to be introduced, you know, otherwise you might get the brush off and all the rest. But yeah, I mean, of course they were trailblazers, and that was heady days. But they're still going, aren't they? You know, it's tenacious. I mean, talking about early heroes, there was John Mayall. I used to go and see John Mayall playing. And John Mayall, of course, you know, father of the British, or grandfather of the British R&B scene, the blues scene. When you think of just the guitarists alone that passed through that band, you know, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, Mick Taylor, in the very early days, I'm just sort of School for Rock. There it was, and I got to meet him when he was just a few days short of his 80th birthday, and he said to me, "Yeah, I'm going to be playing a gig on my 80th birthday," and I remember seeing 70th birthday celebration on video, and thinking, "Oh, isn't that amazing that he's doing that at that age. And of course, when I was a kid, when I was in my mid-teens, we used to go and see him playing live. And we would say, he's 33. Isn't it amazing that he can still get up there and do that at his age? That's what we're thinking. Now here's me at 70 thinking, the real people that are the real thing. That's the.
It's that longevity, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is the longevity. People like B.B. King who are still doing it, even though they were in a wheelchair. That's.
And it's passion.
Never give up. Never
it's
give
that
in.
Passion, that driving force.
It keeps you young. I think it keeps you.
Definitely.
I can't understand people who aren't passionate about anything.
I know.
I don't understand that.
I don't get that.
No. So you're driven. There you are.
Yes.
And my mum, bless her, is about to turn 91.
June.
That's right. And she went to the doctor. She's one of the first people to have gotten the jab in this country.
Wow.
And the doctor said, "Oh, I can't believe your age. I thought you were about my age, 57." And of course, she was glowing from that.
Bless her.
From the compliment. And she loves that. So she's still full of life, and she absolutely is passionate about everything. She hates the lockdown, of course, because, this is a time when she can't visit her friends and family, and it's so important to her. A very gregarious person. Likes a drink, likes a celebration. Party girl still.
Fantastic.
She's
keeping her young.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, bless her. So let's talk about your Genesis days, if we may.
Sure.
The road to Genesis, it was sort of 5 years of waiting for someone to respond to your ad. And then I love the ad, your revised ad that you put in Melody Maker in 1970. Guitarist writer seeks receptive musicians determined to strive beyond existing stagnant musical forms.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I know. Yeah, I had Winston Churchill write that for me. No, I was trying to appeal to the idea of ideals and let's get into the fight and all that. And it caught Peter Gabriel's eye.
Great.
So that's really what got me the gig with Genesis. So you might think a humble ad doesn't make any difference, but maybe it's the power of the word if you can get across it with a commitment. Even
you weren't sure either then, were you? You had a chat with your mate down at the Chelsea Potter. Was your life about to change?
Yes.
It was the right decision.
He talked me into it. He said, "You're not doing anything better right now, are you?" And I couldn't find it. I couldn't argue with that. And you're not doing anything better right now, are you? And he was absolutely right, because I was so unsure of if not only was I going to team up with these guys, but we were going to be living together, and they were all.
It was a big commitment.
It was a big commitment, and it means you're going to leave home, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and you're going to be on stage playing professionally in front of people. So it had all been a dream up to then, and then suddenly it was going to become a reality, and you're having to make that leap.
Good old Frank Murphy, though, for twisting your arm.
That was Frank Murphy, photographer, very talented young photographer as he was at the time.
It's been so interesting chatting to you. I could talk to you for hours, honestly. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Great talking to you, Claire. And
you too. Thank you so much. Hey, good luck with the album, and it's a brilliant album. It's been an absolute delight talking to you, and maybe we'll get to talk about the book another time.
I think so, yes. It could be another time. Thank you. All the best.
Bye-bye for now. Bye.